Hello and welcome to the highlights of this week on the Politics Hub. Well, let's kick off right away with the big political event of the week, the Chancellor's autumn statement, one of the last chances for the government to shift the dial ahead of the coming general election. Well, there's not long to go now until the Chancellor makes his autumn statement, setting out the government's plans for the economy.
Is now the right time for tax cuts, Chancellor?
One strategist said to me yesterday, when I asked them about these dividing lines, they said their bigger problem isn't what to put in the autumn statement, it's having a leader who keeps changing strategy. It's a bit like watching a drunk driver moving down the road.
I mean, you're the government, let's remind you. I am in opposition.
Where's your policy? Your policy is £28 billion a year of more spending. Are you borrowing that?
Irresponsible borrowing, which is exactly what you did when you crashed the economy.
OK, you made your point.
Our plan for the British economy is working, but the work is not done. Both he and I wanted to make a Jeremy Prime Minister. In fairness, his party and mine are probably equally relieved we failed. We are delivering the biggest business tax cut in modern British history, the largest ever cut to employee and self-employed national insurance, and the biggest package of tax cuts to be implemented since the 1980s.
The Chancellor claims that the economy has turned a corner, yet the truth is that under the Conservatives, growth has hit a dead end.
Yes.
It really felt like a pre-election autumn statement.
It really did, and actually we were just saying it did what it said on the tin.
A lot of these numbers, I don't want to be too rude, they're sort of made up. I mean, in terms of the spending numbers.
This is a reality.
Fabulous little sequence from Ed Conway earlier where he was doing his Bruce Forsyth essay. Will it be higher? Will it be lower?
And now it is heading there to the highest level since at least 1948. It's very hard for this Chancellor and this Prime Minister to say they're presiding over a low-tax economy. It is not a low-tax economy. It is the highest tax economy that we've had in a lifetime.
Now, Jeremy Hunt stood up in the House of Commons today and announced what he described as the biggest tax cut in British history. But what if I told you that actually you'll be paying more tax next year, and the year after that, and the year after that? And it's because of a sleight of hand that will end up raising enough cash to fund the entire police service and then some. Now, when I told my team that I was thinking about speaking to you this evening about the fiscal drag, I'll be honest, there was a bit of concern about the viewing figures. But this is actually really important. The fiscal drag basically means the number of people who are dragged into paying a high rate of tax without the government actually increasing the nominal tax rate. So in other words, it's a stealth tax. By freezing the tax thresholds that the government's done every year, more people will end up paying more tax. So the fiscal drag will raise, get this, £12.4 billion next year, and then it goes up fast, really fast, rising to £44.6 billion in 5 years' time. £44 billion. You know, we really are through the looking glass now. To put it in context, right now, the entire budget for the Department for Transport is £28 billion. So by 2028 to 29, the fiscal drag will be funding multiple government departments. I mean, they're not going to put that on the side of a bus. And, you know, I'm not sure if it's just me, but are we really OK with this much of our public spending being funded by a tax rise that no one's really talking about? The Chief Secretary to the Treasury, Laura Trost, joins us now. Good to have you here.
Thank you. Lovely to be here.
What's your sort of main reaction to the autumn statement today, then?
Well, obviously, this was an autumn statement for growth. It was about backing business and supporting people. We know we've had a really difficult year, but because of the difficult decisions that the Chancellor has taken, that the Prime Minister's taken, we've managed to halve inflation, which means that we've been able to take the measures we have today, like giving a tax cut to 27 million employed people.
Obviously, the cut to national insurance, 2 percentage points off national insurance, is going to make a difference to people.
It really will, £450 a year on average.
The overall tax burden is still going up next year, right?
So the steps that we've taken today will bring it down by 0.7%. That is significant. Obviously, we've had a couple of years where we've had to spend a lot of money, or £400 billion on COVID, £100 billion on supporting people's energy. Those were the right things to do. I think people at home would recognise that. And we've got to pay for them. But this was still the biggest tax-cutting event since the 1980s, and that is significant.
But the tax burden is still going up next year.
So if you look at what we've done overall, so for the average worker, taxes will be going up on average, due to today and everything we've done since 2010, by £1,000 a year. But it is true that some of the highest paid will see their taxes going up still, but that is a decision that we've made. We are really supporting those who are working, who are the lowest paid, and you've seen that through everything we've done today, and additionally what we've done with benefits.
It's not just... Look, I don't want to sort of, the national insurance can't, that's a can't, like you say, It's significant, but the freeze in income tax thresholds is a big deal, the tax drag, right? It means 4 million of the lowest paid people are also going to be pulled into paying tax. I mean, I remember David Cameron in the coalition, he took 3.2 million people out of paying income tax, and now Rishi Sunak's put 4 million back in. What does David Cameron say about this?
We do not shy away from the fact we had to take difficult decisions a year ago, right? And that is why we've seen inflation come down. But that is also
rich,
why...
though, isn't it, to say,
but that is also why we've done things today.
In modern history, and then to say that actually more people pay more tax.
Real incomes, for example, for those on the national living wage have gone up by 30%, right? We've increased the national living wage today by a huge amount, by 9.8%, which means it will go to £11.44 for someone on that. And this is all because of the things that we've done. And if you contrast that to the Labour Party who still want to borrow £28 billion extra a year, that will push up mortgages, that will push up people's taxes. There's a real difference between us and them. And even today, Rachel Reeves was saying that she would unfreeze thresholds. She was implying that she would unfreeze, difficult to say, unfreeze thresholds today in the Commons, and that will cost £45 billion a year. Where are they proposing to get this money? There is a real difference between us and the Labour Party.
And we've spoken a lot about tax. I just want to talk to you about public services.
Of course.
Because it feels like you've penciled in a massive squeeze in public services once inflation's taken into account. And I just want to show you this graph just to try and illustrate what I'm trying to say. So this is the projected spending in government departments. The yellow line there at the top is a projected line from March, and the blue line is today. So you've effectively taken out £19 billion in
what does
public services.
Escape mean? So so this is my area. So in terms of the amount that we're spending on public services, it has gone up by 2.6% since the spending review in real terms. That's the whole amount of public spending. And by the end of what we call the forecast period, so that's 28-29, it would have gone up by £85 billion in real terms. Now, of course, within that, we've made some choices. We have prioritised the NHS. NHS spending is up by a third since 2019, and that's excluding COVID spend.
We all know, you know, and I know, that what you're projecting post the election really means a huge squeeze in non-protected departments, and that's things like the courts, that's things like capital budgets, that's things like transport. You know that.
So
that's
we're increasing. So
yes,
you're right in terms of choices. We're increasing spending by 1% in real terms overall. So that's really important for people at home to understand. Now, within that, there will be decisions. We will prioritise certain areas. We will prioritise the NHS. We will prioritise schools. That is really important. But spending is going up in real terms, and it's very important to remember that.
It feels a little bit like it's a kind of scorched earth policy for an incoming Labour government.
I mean,
no one expects you to stick to these spending plans.
1%
or any
real,
government.
1% real is an expansion in spending. That is a big expansion in spending, 1% real. £85 billion more in real terms by 28-29. There is questions as to the growth of public spending versus the growth of GDP overall. But we can be absolutely clear that public spending is going up in real terms.
OK. Now, you've been brought into the Treasury inner sanctum, shall we say. You've kind of been made Chief Secretary to the Treasury. So I just wonder if you could kind of take me behind the scenes a bit. How much of a backseat driver is Rishi Sunak?
Look, I have worked in government for a long period of time, so I used to be a special advisor in Number 10 under David Cameron. Delighted to see him back. And there is always very close working, and it's really important there is close working between Number 10 and the Treasury, and that will always be the case where you have a united team, and that is what we do have now, a united team. We've got
so is
people
Rishi
working
Sunak
together.
kind of in and out, looking over Jeremy Hunt's shoulder, saying, "Oh, I'd do this a bit differently when I was in the job"?
No, but they are working together, as you would expect, and people at home would expect the Prime Minister and Chancellor to be working very closely together on a fiscal event.
And then my other question, right, on last night's show, we spoke to Harriet Baldwin, who used to be a minister in the Treasury, and she said that even when she was a Treasury Minister, she didn't actually know what was going to be in the autumn statement, the entire autumn statement, before it happened. Is that still the case now?
Some bits are kept away, and obviously each of the individual ministers have individual bits which they are working on. But obviously it's the Chancellor and Prime Minister who see the whole view of the whole thing.
Did you see the whole thing before?
I don't want to go into what I did and didn't see.
Was it a surprise?
I don't want to go into what I did and didn't see, but yes, it's true that some bits are seen by certain ministers, not by others.
Fascinating stuff. Laura Trott, thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for being on the programme. Welcome back to the Politics Hub. Well, the government might have been hoping that the big cut to national insurance would lead the news agenda for a couple of days at least, but the latest immigration figures showing that 2022 was a record year for the number of people coming to the UK rekindled simmering discontent within the Conservative Party on the issue. I spoke to Richard Tice, the leader of the Reform UK Party. An exclusive polling for Sky News a couple of weeks ago found that the Conservatives were losing more of their 2019 voters to Mr Tice's party than to Labour. So what he says matters. So what's your reaction to today's immigration figures?
They're appalling. They're a complete betrayal of what everybody who voted Conservative, who voted for Brexit, what we wanted. We were told and promised by the Conservative government that Brexit would take back control of our borders, that it would reduce immigration numbers below 200,000 a year. And instead, actually what's happened is that they've at least trebled since then. We've now got people coming into the UK about the size of Birmingham every single year. It's well over 1% on a net basis per annum, and it's leading to huge pressures all over the UK. Just yesterday, the OBR confirmed that living standards per head are falling and that large numbers of immigration are a significant part of that. We've got a housing crisis, we've got a health crisis, we've got an inflation crisis, and we've also, Sophie, we've also got a cultural crisis. And
let's talk about the cultural crisis in a minute, but just to talk about the, the care sector, for example, 157,000 vacancies last year. There's an awful lot of people who've arrived in this country working in our hospitals, for example, as well. So do we not need some immigration?
We've got the highest population ever in the United Kingdom. We've got record people on out-of-work benefits. Yes, let's have smart immigration where we've got genuine shortages, but at the moment we've got we've got open border chaos, and so we should be training our own people, as historically we've always done. Smart immigration, we could have one in, one out, what I call net zero immigration. That would be about 450,000 a year coming in the sectors we genuinely need. What you've got to do, though, in the UK, you've got to make work pay. And despite the autumn statement yesterday, at the moment, for too many people, work doesn't pay.
So you're up for higher taxes then?
Taxes are at record highs.
You're up for higher taxes then to make work pay in the care sector, in hospitals?
You should lift the tax threshold from 12,500 to 20,000 to make work pay. For people on low incomes and for people on average salaries, that's a massive difference.
You talked about the cultural issue. What do you mean?
What I mean is that for the UK to work, we want people who come here to want to enjoy and to live under one single British culture that unifies us all. Everything that we stand, our way of life.
What is one single British culture?
That's about being British. It's about who we are, where we've come from, our way of life.
But what does that mean? You say that British culture means being British. But what does it mean?
It means everything that our values, our sense of decency, of fair play, of transparency, of honesty and respect for each other.
A lot of people who come to the UK are decent.
David Cameron, Tony Blair, Dame Louise Casey all said, and they're right, and Suella Braverman, multiculturalism has failed. Unifying under one single British culture, that's where we need to go. So you need to be able to absorb immigration in numbers that can work for everybody. If you have mass immigration, you get too much pressure too quickly, as we're seeing on public services, and people don't integrate and absorb into communities, and that's bad for everybody.
What would be a sensible level of immigration?
So we're standing for net zero immigration, so about 450,000 people on average.
So what would you do then for example, would you scrap the number of people who've come here through Ukraine and Hong Kong then? Would you just stop that?
No, that's not what we're saying. You've got to look at it year on year.
They are part of the immigration figures, a big part of it, and you want net zero. So what does that...
Net zero means one in, one out. There's about 450,000
So for every Ukrainian who comes here, you would have to say something.
But the numbers have increased since the Ukraine crisis. In terms of the number of people who came here, the numbers have actually increased since. Why? Because, for example, they're granting more work visas to non-EU citizens. They're granting 600,000 student visas. And so they basically opened the borders and made it complete open season. A mass immigration is really not the right solution. It's not what people voted for.
You said you want to stand in every seat. Are you thinking about doing any deals with any Conservative MPs who might have similar views to you on immigration?
Look, I still wear the scars on my back from December 19.
Are people texting you trying to see if they can have special...
Zero deals with the Tories. We stand in every single seat. Democracy's better when people have got more options, more discussion, more debate, and we stand for many things that the other two main parties, you can hardly tell the difference between them. They're basically different forms of socialism. High tax, high regulation, pro-net zero, all of that equals low growth.
A socialist,
it's a catastrophe. Yes, he's certainly not a Conservative in the traditional sense of the word.
So we've seen an anti-Islam populist leader win at the Dutch general election. Do you think it could happen here?
I don't think anybody was surprised that yet another country across Europe has voted against the establishment politics. People are very concerned about very high levels, almost mass immigration, and they're saying that's not improving our living standards. And for them, it challenges their own cultures within their own nations. And I think people are concerned about the high levels of mass immigration that we're now seeing in the UK. So yeah, I think people are saying, actually, I want to vote for a party that stands for what we call net zero immigration. That's the right thing to do, and that wants to make their living standards better off. And you achieve that by going for growth with low taxes, low regulation. We've got to get rid of the madness of net zero that's impoverishing us all. That's how you get high growth and improve people's living standards.
I have to ask you this. You've been watching Nigel Farage on I'm a Celebrity?
Of course. Hasn't he been doing fantastically? I think people are enjoying seeing Nigel, the individual, getting on well with others, having some interesting discussions, and he's revealing his true personality in many ways. And I think that actually viewers are enjoying it, and I hope he goes all the way in the programme.
What would you do if he, called you up once he gets back from the other side of the world?
Tells me I must do it next year.
And says,
no thanks.
What about if he says, oh, you know what, I might come back and lead the party? Would you let him? Would there be a free slot?
I made it very clear. The more help Nigel can give, the better. I'm the leader. He's made it very clear he doesn't want to stand in a first-past-the-post election. We're very pro-proportional representation. That's the fairest way to conduct elections.
Could he come back as leader, though?
But the more help Nigel can give, the better. So let's wait and see. The Tories are terrified of the progress of reform.
You're not ruling out him coming to lead reform.
I'm the leader. He doesn't want to stand in a first-past-the-post election, but I want as much help as Nigel feels able to give.
Neither of those two things
but Sophie,
are
we're
the answer to whether or not you would let him come back to lead
action,
the party.
not titles and not waffle like you hear from too many politicians in Westminster.
I thought you were the straight talker.
I'm the straight talker. I'm telling you, I'm the leader, and the more help Nigel can give, the better. There's no more straight talking than that.
Now, I want to talk about Girls Aloud. Not something I thought I would say on this programme, but the saying goes that a week is a long time in politics, and it has really felt like that recently. So 10 years is a positive eternity. But it is a decade since the girl group last performed, Girls Aloud, and today they announced details of a new tour to mark their reunion. It's a catchy song, you got to say. It's a catchy song. But if that makes you feel old, you should just remember that when the girls last performed, it was a time pre-Brexit, pre-Trump, when the Lib Dems were still in government. So we thought we would test our panel's memory of 2013 in politics. Ready?
Ready.
OK, it's multiple choice, so don't worry.
Phew.
Right, here's the first question. David Cameron suffered a bruising House of Commons defeat when MPs narrowly rejected his call for military action in which conflict? Was it A, Syria, B, Somalia, or C, Libya?
A.
A. A. And the answer is... It is Syria.
Yeah.
Full house for both of you. OK, question 2. Which part of the UK hosted the final G8 summit before Russia was expelled for invading Crimea? Was it A, Wales, B, Scotland, or C, Northern Ireland? The final G8 summit.
I'm going to say Scotland because I feel like more common, more space, but that's a guess.
I really should know, and I don't, but I'm going to say C.
The answer was...
Ooh,
correct.
Poppy.
Right, Poppy noses in front.
I mean, this is all just reminding me that David Cameron's made a comeback, isn't it?
Yeah, look at that photo.
It's
David Cameron and Barack Obama.
There he is.
Doesn't look that much older.
Right, number 3. What did one man protesting that Labour was on the side of the rich throw at then leader Ed Miliband on a visit to a market in London? Was it A, self-raising flour, B, custard pie, or C, eggs?
I think it's C.
Yeah, you would think C, but I have some vague flower-based memory of that moment. But OK, I'm going to back you since you did well last. I'm going to go C too.
It was C.
Good choice.
Poppy.
I know where that custard pie was a different incident. I remember that one.
And to be honest, you'd probably see it on his hair if it was flour or
Yeah.
pie, to be honest.
Poor
Bit of a picture clue there.
politicians on the campaign trail. I mean,
It's brutal, isn't it? Right, which party did then Cabinet member Ken Clarke describe as a collection of clowns with fruitcakes, loonies, waifs and strays among its members? Was it UKIP, the Conservatives, or the monster raving loony party?
Well, I feel like now it would be B. I think it's an entirely plausible thing for Ken Clarke to say about the Conservative Party at this moment. But my guess is A.
it's definitely A.
It is... Let's have a look. It is A. Doing very well here, guys.
Yeah, it makes me feel like I haven't aged
Normally-
at all in
normally
10
I guess
years.
you
Excellent.
don't do this one on the quizzes, I'll be honest. This is good. Right, question 5. After the coalition, God, so retro, coalition, announced measures to cut energy costs, what did the Conservative peer Baroness Rawlings propose as the answer to many of the government's aims? Did she think people should A, eat more soup, B, use electric blankets, or C, use their pets for warmth?
I actually don't know because C has been mooted recently, I believe, by an energy company or something, so it's vaguely familiar. So I'm not sure if that's a recent memory or an existing one.
Well, then I feel like B wouldn't actually help reduce your energy bills that much because
gosh,
it's
does that
also
mean it's A?
electricity and energy. So should we buy?
Okay, let's go for
by
A.
elimination?
OK, eat more soup. It was...
Oh, no, B would.
Using electric blankets.
says.
Doesn't make any sense.
It doesn't sound like the greatest advice, I'll be honest. Right, and this is the final one, the last question. What comparison did then Lib Dem President Tim Farron use to describe how resilient and indestructible his party was or is? Was it A, a Nokia brick phone? They are pretty indestructible, to be fair. Lego bricks or cockroaches?
I mean, I feel like A would make loads of sense, so it probably isn't that one. It's probably the weirdest and most unexpected one, given that it's Tim Farron, so I'm going to go C.
It's got to be C. The other two are too sort of obvious.
Right.
They actually make a sentence that's comprehensible.
Yeah, it's cockroaches. I'm really not sure describing your party as cockroaches after a nuclear war is the kind of slogan you want to put on a bus. But hey, who am I to know?
Bless.
Thank you both very much. Well, that's all for this week's Politics Hub's highlights. And remember, you can catch up on all the latest news from the Politics Hub 24/7. Just scan the QR code. Thanks for watching and see you again on Monday at 7. Goodbye.